Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. We begin our video with a story in which our OP decided to teach good manners to police officers on the road. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Gotta respect the speed limit. I live on a long, hilly rural road. It has a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit and is a no-passing zone the entire way. It's illegal, unsafe, and nearly impossible to pass someone, no matter how slowly they're going. Because it's a quiet road and away from town, locals normally drive 50 to 55 miles per hour. This was fine until the police started setting speed traps. Because the road's so hilly, it's easy to accidentally go 55 miles per hour when going downhill. And that's how they got me and a lot of my neighbors. Okay, fine, it's technically speeding, but I leave work around the time they start heading back home, so I either see them fly ahead of me at 60 miles per hour or tailgate me the entire way home. Pisses me off. So I started driving the speed limit. Exactly the speed limit. 45 miles per hour down the entire stretch of road. When we come to those sharp turns, I go all the way down to 20 miles per hour, suggested speed. Almost every night, a cop gets stuck behind me the entire way. And there's no way for them to pass me. They also can't turn on another road because all the others are just gravel back roads that lead to farms. My long, hilly road is their only route. It definitely pisses them off, so they'll turn their brights on and weave around their lane to try to get me to speed up. As soon as I turn into my driveway, they gun it. I even had one turn his lights on to make me pull over, only for him to speed past me and drive ahead. It's probably not smart to inconvenience a cop, but what else am I supposed to do? I'm just respecting the speed limit. And our next story. I destroyed my family friend's business and credibility. The background. A few years ago, after I started university, a friend of my mother's, who we'll call Cook, started what can be generously called a restaurant in a small town a couple hours outside the city we lived in. It was really a glorified hot dog stand and a golf course. My mother had invested money into this business, so she had a personal stake in ensuring its success. That meant she would often enlist us, aka my brother and I, to waiter when she could not do it herself. And my brother hated this guy, though I didn't blame him. Cook had no idea how to run a business, and he was completely uninterested in learning. He was also completely computer illiterate and had me set up the Google account for his business. And in order to get us to work in his business, he would pick one of us up from our home, drive us 2 hours or so out of town, and we were basically stuck there until we were driven back due to the fact that neither of us had a driver's license. And since my brother had problems with this guy, legit concerns that were brushed off as him having a bad attitude, I was the one who, more often than not, had to spend 2 to 10 days at a time there, stuck in a barely livable house until I was let back home. My mother was no better. She'd often tell us that we'd be working 2 days in the middle of the week, making job hunting very difficult for my brother and I. Furthermore, she treated us not as employees, but as her children. Thus, any mistake was clearly our fault, and not because neither of them could A, train staff, B, use a computer at all, C, manage a business at all, D, utilize my brother and I in the most effective way, considering my brother and I had already graduated university and I was working towards a double major in business. Furthermore, they were completely unprofessional. They would host shouting matches in Chinese where customers could hear, and the kitchen was filthy, despite Cook's insistence that the kitchen was the cleanest place in the restaurant. Yeah, right, an ice rink was less slippery than the ground in there, and he would routinely touch cooked food after handling raw meat. And I distinctly remember sweeping up what I thought was a green bell pepper, only to realize it was a moldy onion ring. Even the stove area was dripping grease. Literally. A big old drop landed on my arm one time. They could not train staff at all. They hired 5 people in the first year and none of them came back the next. Cook in particular was especially two-faced in how he handled customers. He'd smile at them and greet them, remembering details from previous conversations, then turn to say to me in Chinese about how they're all stupid, stingy retirees with too much money and free time on their hands. All of this left a great feeling of resentment for both me and my brother. Not only was it effectively trapping us to work for this completely incompetent individual, we would get basically nothing out of it. This was particularly frustrating for me because as a business student at the time, I could see all the ways the place could improve. I even offered to write up some policies, do some inventory management, and take a look at the administrative side, just to help out and get some experience for myself. They kept insisting that they didn't need it. Sure, we were paid bare minimum, and the guy did know how to cook, but we have to bear the brunt of their frustration while hiding the fact that we're sick of helping out until we couldn't anymore. The incident. Last year, I graduated university. I figured that once I walked the stage and had my diploma, I could spend the next week job hunting. No dice. Immediately after I graduated on the Monday afterwards, my mother voluntold me that I had to work 10 days in the Hellstrand. I lasted 6 before it happened. By all accounts, it wasn't that busy of a day to start off with. There was a breakfast brunch for Father's Day that barely anyone attended, and most people that did show up wanted to order off the menu. But both Cook and my mother were incredibly stressed out, and both of them were taking it out on me. My mother spent the day micromanaging me and finding flaws in every little thing I did, like cleaning an empty table over clearing plates from a table out on the deck, to not immediately refilling coffee or water when a glass or mug was half full, to not table touching every 5 minutes. Cook just shouted a lot and gave contradictory orders every 2 minutes. But it was the combination of my mother and Cook screaming at me for a mistake I didn't even make, something about a sauce that a customer requested but they got mad about, refusing to listen to me, literally shutting me down when I opened my mouth, and Cook mocking me for breaking down in tears. I remember him saying, "You're 25, you should know better than to cry over a stupid mistake," made me realize that not only could I not handle it anymore, but I wanted to burn the place to the ground. I booked a flight out of the province that day and left a week later. I didn't even tell my mother when or why I left. The revenge. Remember how I said not only were they completely unprofessional, but also completely computer illiterate? See, despite the fact that I was no longer in the province, I still had all the login information for the business. Furthermore, because I knew all the laws that he blatantly refused to learn, I knew all the violations that he had committed in the business. For the first part of my revenge, I signed out his computer from the Google account. I don't think it was really necessary since he never used that computer in the first place for anything other than Facebook, but I wanted to make sure that he and my mother wouldn't be able to stop me. Before I left the province, I claimed the business in review sites using the email and the business phone number. Then I blasted every single review, positive or negative, with all the crap he used to say about customers. Any negative review was immediately mocked. Any positive review was left with a note of, "Thank you, you cheap bee." Any questions were met with hostility, and it basically boiled down to, "I'm right, you're wrong." I also make mentions about how he didn't wash his hands in the kitchen, and the stuff that they're yelling in Chinese are insults about the uppity customers. Given that it was a tourist-based town, I'm fairly certain that deep dip of sales my brother mentioned later on was because of all those. And no one suspected a thing because my mother and Cook didn't know how to work the internet, and my brother didn't care enough to look up the business. Next, I meticulously documented all the complaints that I had between my brother and myself, as well as the ones from the few people Cook had hired but never kept because he could not train them. I reported the 2 times that I slipped in his kitchen, incidents where he refused to wash his hands in between handling salad and raw meat because it took too long, and I handed those off to the Health Services Department. I also anonymously informed the Tax Revenue Agency that he was severely underreporting income as employees were instructed only to write down the credit-debit receipts to report in sales. The third part of my revenge wasn't really my part, to be honest. Rather, it was because of his own incompetence. As I said before, he was completely computer illiterate. I didn't even have to lock out the person he hired to do accounting because he didn't bother reporting his expenses except hand them a garbage bag full of receipts. To be honest, I felt kind of sorry for them, but because their hands were tied, they couldn't dispute any of the claims that I made. What I did do, however, was text them all the things that my mother and Cook said about them so that they wouldn't bother trying to defend them. They quit a month before the crap hit the fan, meaning that Cook was left holding the bag. So naturally, given that the business wasn't making near as much money to make rent, let alone pay off all these fines that he was slapped down with, the government repossessed everything. From everything in the dinky little house that he was renting for business purposes to every single fork and knife he bought. Because of all the health code violations, he couldn't find a job as a cook again, which was his only job for about 30 years. And because the tax revenue agency knew how bad he was with managing businesses, they naturally denied him when he requested a permit to open up a growing operation. As far as I know, he's no longer in contact with my family, but his brother-in-law, who's my mom's hairstylist, mentioned that he had to move somewhere else to get away from all the bad reputation. My mother mostly got off scot-free because all the business permits and licenses were under his name, but she lost quite a bit of money, and last I heard, my family had to move into a smaller house. And no one knew that I was the one who was doing it. My brother suspected as he relayed details of what had happened to me, but I never confirmed it. Not that he'd tell my parents, because honestly, F that hell strong. As for me, I'd like to say that everything's sunshine and roses, but my decision to impulsively move provinces had its ups and downs. I did manage to find a place to live and a place to work, so at least I'm alive. It's hard, but I'd rather be doing this than going back. Good for you, man. I know it may seem like life is really hard for you right now, but later on you'll realize just how worth it was for you to move out and completely start from scratch. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.